Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. L'honorable député de Terrebonne.
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, we're into the third week of the SNC-Lavalin crisis. All parties are trying to drag it out, not solve it. Meanwhile, not a word about protecting jobs. Nothing from the NDP, the so-called Workers' Party. They're willing to sacrifice 3,000 jobs in Quebec to win elections in BC. Not a word from the Conservatives, the so-called Economy Party. They're willing to sacrifice a headquarters in Montreal so they can take shots at the Prime Minister for one more day. And not much from the Liberals either, who have the power to solve this crisis through a remediation agreement, but they're ducking their heads hoping the storm will pass. It goes without saying, Quebecers aren't well served by a federal government that's willing to take 3,000 families hostage for weeks on end while they engage in petty partisan politics.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This year, Winnipeg's Festival de Voyageurs celebrated 50th anniversary, and we came together to commemorate the heroes of the fur trade. Some voices, although, have not been heard. And once again, I stand to bring attention to Canada's first female voyageur, Marianne Gabory. This remarkable woman broke generations of convention and made her own place in the world. Refusing to stay in Montreal, she joined the fur trade and spent 5 years traveling across the prairies and making Winnipeg her home. Fearlessly trekking through thousands of kilometers of forest and prairie, she hunted bison, traded, and heroically saved another voyageur from an attacking grizzly bear. She was remarkably intelligent, learning 4 languages in a time when few people were literate at all. She did everything her male colleagues did and more, yet history remembers her only as the grandmother of a famous man. Today, I challenge all of you to honor her memory and celebrate all voyageurs who helped to build our nation.
The Honourable Member for Peace River Westlaw.
Mr. Speaker, in 1905, Alberta joined Confederation and quickly became the workhorse of Canada. Our grain fed the hungry, our lumber built homes, and later our oil provided energy. Confederation allowed Canada to become a farmer of sorts, harvesting the resources of its various plots of land. Sadly, today, the farmer has forgotten how to farm. After riding this workhorse through a world recession, Alberta now has a cold. Alberta is suffering under softwood lumber dispute, trade negotiations that have failed our agricultural producers, and a failure to provide pipelines has forced our energy producers out of the province. Alberta, Canada's workhorse, has lost thousands of jobs, and Albertans are overtaxed and their hands are lassoed by a farmer with the blinders on. We have been a willing and able workhorse for decades, and despite that loyalty, it seems like the farmer has led Alberta behind the barn to put an end to the misery. Mr. Speaker, it's time for the farmer to pony up and look after his workhorse. Call the vet or relinquish the reins.
The Honourable Member for Central Nova.
Nova Scotia's craft distillers are taking on the world. The Steinert Distillery in Ariseg, Nova Scotia, just down the road from my childhood home, recently took home the prize for Best Classic Gin at the 2019 World Gin Awards in London, England. I've had the pleasure of meeting Tom Steinert on many occasions, and I can tell you he is passionate about the traditional practice he brings to his distilling craft. The Steinert Distillery makes many varieties of gins and vodkas with distribution across Canada and internationally. You can even find products at certain events right here on Parliament Hill. As a local representative, it's encouraging to see his work bringing good jobs to rural communities. I want to congratulate Tom on this prestigious award, thank him for helping grow our local economy, and encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to pop in and try some of his products next time you're home. To all the distillers back home in Nova Scotia, cheers.
Cheers.
The Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, gender equality requires strong social programs that help women thrive, affordable housing, health care, and pharmacare. It means access to affordable quality childcare so women don't have to choose between having a family and having a career. Gender equality means pay equity for women who can participate in all aspects of life free from the threat of gender-based violence and free to make decisions about their own bodies. As we celebrate International Women's Day, March 8th, let's commit to continue working for real and lasting change for women. That's what New Democrats work for each and every day.
Député d'Hull-Aylmer.
The honourable member for Hull-Aylmer. Mr. Speaker, seniors are often given short shrift. We're so quick to say the younger generation is the most ingenious and innovative. We tend to forget about our predecessors. Seniors have a lot to be proud of. They shaped our country in various ways, and they're there to firmly remind us of past mistakes to avoid repeating.
Lesson that I've learned through my Hull-Aylmer Seniors Council. They've challenged me with their insightful views and their willingness to have frank discussions about the future of our country. To my council, I thank you. Believe me when I say that our frequent council meetings are one of the highlights in my career as Member of Parliament for Hull-Aylmer.
While seniors are watching, I'd like to say thank you for your contributions to our country. This government wants to work with you to build a better future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Haldeman-Norfolk.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in an emergency, it's important to stay calm, cool, and collected. And that's exactly what a bright and brave youngster did recently in my riding. One morning recently, 7-year-old Dylan Rollison of Simcoe found his mother, Jessica, who suffers from type 1 diabetes, unconscious. Wow. And while almost anyone of any age would be rightfully frightened in this kind of situation, Dylan remained calm, cool, and collected as he called 911 and explained what was happening until the paramedics arrived. EMS on scene praised Dylan for his actions and credited him for saving his mother's life.
Hear, hear.
EMS officials were so impressed with Dylan that they presented him with a plaque of life-saving recognition on behalf of the OPP Interim Commissioner at a special ceremony at his school. Now, together, Dylan and first responders taught a valuable lesson to everyone there about the proper use of 911 and the importance of staying calm, cool, and collected during an emergency.
Hear, 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 hear. L'honorable député de Vaudreuil-Soulanges.
The honourable member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, over the past 10 years, thanks to the hard work of Jim Beauchamp and his family, Jay de la Durante, Ken Bell, Rob Dumas, Craig and Brett Nolan, Ken Doran, and a whole army of volunteers in cooperation with the town of Hudson, our community of Vaudreuil-Soulanges becomes Irish for one day for the annual St. Patrick's Day Parade.
Whether it's sporting a bright green bow tie, celebrating rich Irish culture and heritage, or simply enjoying our historic and quaint town of Hudson, there's always a good reason to celebrate St. Patrick's Day in our community. This year, the parade will be led by Grand Marshal Jamie Orchard, Irish Woman of the Year Brenda O'Farrell, Parade Queen Samara O'Gorman, Princesses Kimberly O'Brien and Emma Gauthier, and Queen Mom Janet Ellerbeck. On March 16th, 1 p.m. on Main Street. Come one, come all, and let's make the 10th anniversary of the Hudson St. Patrick's Day Parade one to remember. Solange, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
The honourable member for Niagara Centre.
Mr. Speaker, on February 20th, I had the pleasure to table the interim report on establishing a Canadian transportation and logistics strategy. The 31 recommendations contained within the report are to promote the free movement of goods as well as people domestically and over international borders. It is easy to see how this fluidity can positively affect local, domestic, and international business interests, Mr. Speaker. Equally as important is to recognize how it will impact individual citizens, Canadians. Mr. Speaker, in Niagara Centre, I look forward to working with our partners to strengthen our economy, aligning with international investment opportunities, promoting the best use of Niagara's transportation-related assets. This report reinforces strategic integrated transportation priorities within Niagara and will align with future capital investments. This will strengthen Niagara's overall global trade performance and therefore provide and sustain good, stable jobs throughout our region. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Caribou Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents in Caribou Prince George, and indeed all Canadians, are paying for this Prime Minister's mistakes. In a recent survey, half of Canadians admit that they're having troubles just making ends meet. It's no wonder. Despite what they say, under this Prime Minister, 2018 finished with wages that are flat and household debt that is climbing. Amid layoffs and plant closures in our energy, forestry, and auto sectors, it's clear that this Prime Minister has failed workers. Worse, the only thing going up for residents in my riding, Cariboo Prince George, are taxes. This Prime Minister, who's never had to worry about money, is happy to let the fine people of Cariboo Prince George pay for his failures. Payroll taxes are up, and the Prime Minister's carbon tax is driving up the cost of fuel and home heating. Canadians just can't afford another Liberal term. Why should they? Make the Liberals pay for their mistakes when they can choose Conservative leadership. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives.
The honourable member for Sydney Victoria. Sydney Victoria.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with February is Black History Month, I'd like to recognize some great Canadians from Whitney Pier, Cape Breton. Claudia Yakmanchuk overcame discrimination by becoming one of the first Nova Scotia black nurses and started Cape Breton's University nursing program. Vincent Waterman, a true human rights activist and patriarch of St. Philip's African Orthodox Church, he served his family, his community, and the great world tirelessly for years. Then there's Campy Crawford. He became the first black municipal police officer east of Montreal in 1964. Because of his great work, the regional police have a service award dedicated to his name. Wow. And last but not least, a former steelworker, alderman, and deputy mayor of Sydney, Eddie Paris, was an advocate for Cape Breton's black community and even had a chance to play for the Queen in his band, the Inspirational Singers. Bravo. Mr. Speaker, let us never forget the true contribution of African Canadians, not only in Cape Breton, but throughout our wonderful country. Thank you very much.
For Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge the Canadian Nuclear Association conference taking place here in Ottawa. Nuclear power plants have been producing clean, emissions-free electricity in Canada since the early 1960s and now produce about 15% of Canada's electricity and 60% in the province of Ontario. Today, Canada is an international Tier 1 nuclear supplier recognized for some of the newest innovation in design, life-saving isotopes, hydrogen as a clean power source, and small modular reactors, recognizing their potential for, among other things, addressing climate change and supplying unlimited clean power to rural and remote communities. Members of the CNA, like Cameco Fuel Manufacturing in my riding of Northumberland Peterborough South, are at the cutting edge of technology and innovation and lead the way in promoting this critical sector of the Canadian economy. I've been privileged to work with the CNA over the last few years. Their advocacy and the commitment to a course of excellence do us all proud. Thank you.
The honourable member for Niagara Falls.
Mr. Speaker, amid a mounting list of failures, the Prime Minister's 2019 carbon tax is just the beginning of what he wants Canadians to pay.
That's right.
Experts agree that it will not be effective and will only lead to economic hardship for Canadians. Now, the Prime Minister's carbon tax will add 11 cents to the cost of every litre of gas and hundreds more for home heating.
Shame.
Despite false assurances that it won't add up to much, independent analysis estimates the cost to be up to $100 more per month. Now, this is yet another area where the Prime Minister needs to come clean with Canadians.
That's right.
Canadians should not be punished with an ineffective tax for working, playing, and living. Worse yet, the Liberal carbon tax will go even higher.
Just come clean.
Now, the Prime Minister doesn't worry about money or deficits, but that isn't the case for most Canadians. Hundreds of dollars in added costs per year matters most to us. In October, we need a clear choice. We have that clear choice. It will be the Conservatives who will ensure that Canadians get ahead instead of falling behind.
The honourable member for Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, bullying is a major problem in our schools, workplaces, homes, and online.
To bullying firsthand. While you might think that for most kids, recess and lunch are their favorite time of the day, kids who are bullied dread time outside of the classroom because they're afraid of not having anyone to speak to, of looking like they have no friends, of being bullied.
Kids who are bullied experience mental health problems, including depression, anxiety, trouble sleeping, strong feelings of loneliness and sadness, and poor academic performance.
Kids to stop going to class and may even cause them to drop out. February 27th is known as Pink Shirt Day, an opportunity to raise awareness about bullying, discrimination, homophobia, and transphobia. As the Pink Shirt Day movement grows each year, join me in taking a stand against bullying. Wear your pink shirts proudly and let everyone know that you do not tolerate bullying or discrimination.
Practice random acts of kindness, empathy, caring, and even more important, speak out against bullying all year long.
The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Jagmeet Singh. I've raised the name of our national NDP leader in the House of Commons dozens of times, and each time the Liberals have responded with a taunt. Jagmeet who? Well, everyone in Burnaby South knows full well who Jagmeet Singh is, and that's why they elected him MP with an overwhelming mandate Monday night. Mr. Speaker, in just 3 sitting days, I won't even be able to use his name anymore because he will be sitting here in the House of Commons. Jagmeet who? He's a political leader like we've never seen before in Canada. Someone who has fought through racism and discrimination and always has the utmost respect for everyone. Above all, Jagmeet Singh is a fighter. He'll be fighting for the people of Burnaby South and all Canadians, for affordable housing now, for universal single-payer public pharmacare, and for real, meaningful, and lasting reconciliation with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Jagmeet who? Canadians will see him in action in this House on March 18th, speaking up about building a Canada where everyone matters and where no one is left behind. Congratulations, Jagmeet!
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill. Order.
Right now, tens of thousands of Canadians are out of work because of the No More Pipelines bill, the tanker ban, failure to build pipelines, and failure to resolve tariffs with the United States. Canada's borders aren't secure, and our asylum system is being abused. Canadians are still detained in China. Taxes are going up, and Canada's debt is out of control. Instead of fighting for Canada, the Prime Minister has been fighting for who? Himself. He's taken an illegal trip to Billionaires Island. He's allowed a lucrative clam fishing contract to be directly awarded to an in-law of his minister, has had caucus embroiled in investigation on shady land deals in Brampton, 4 groping scandals, including himself, and now he is accused of conspiring to prevent justice being brought to rich executives accused of bribing Muammar Gaddafi's son with prostitutes. Disgusting. Canadians are standing up to say enough is enough. We stand with them against this Prime Minister because Canada's Conservatives are fighting for better.
The honourable member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Mr. Speaker, in my city, Hamilton, there's an active Francophone community which recently held its 6th annual Black History Month Gala. The evening was a celebration of our diversity with 20 French-speaking African countries represented. We spent a wonderful evening together full of culture, music, dance, fashion, and the African people's world-famous joie de vivre. I had the pleasure of sharing with them the Prime Minister's words. Let's celebrate young Black Canadians, their strength, their voices, their accomplishments, and their bright futures. And let's not forget the inequalities and obstacles many still face. Accordingly, Heritage Canada is investing $9 million over 3 years to help overcome the problems young Black people face, to promote better understanding of their experiences, and to facilitate dialogue among all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The honourable leader of the opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claims that he is pleased that the former Attorney General will be able to share her perspectives on SNC-Lavalin. But we now know why. It turns out that he is still dictating what she can and cannot say on this Liberal corruption scandal. If the Prime Minister has nothing to hide, then why is he still trying to silence the former Attorney General? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have always said that it is important for Canadians to be able to hear different perspectives on this issue. And we announced that we would waive solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidence and any other confidentiality obligations regarding the communications of the former Attorney General. We will allow her to continue her important work, and we will allow the Ethics Commissioner and the Justice Committee to do their important work.
Believe, but the facts tell otherwise. He's refusing to let his former Attorney General share her entire story. Here's what she had to say herself yesterday, and I quote, "The order in council leaves in place whatever restraints there are on my ability to speak freely about matters that occurred after I left the post of Attorney General." So what happened between the time she was removed as Attorney General to the day that she resigned that this Prime Minister is so desperate to keep hidden?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We took the unprecedented step of waiving both cabinet confidentiality and solicitor-client privilege in the matter currently under study by the Committee of Justice and the Ethics Commissioner. This is a significant step that we took because we know that Canadians need to hear different perspectives on this matter. That is why we welcome the work that the committee is doing, and we welcome the work that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is doing on this matter.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
But check the fine print, Mr. Speaker, because there's an important detail that the Prime Minister is leaving out. Something happened. Something happened between the time that the former Attorney General lost her job for speaking truth to power until the day that she resigned from Cabinet, that this Prime Minister is desperate to keep hidden from Canadians. So can the Prime Minister confirm that sometime in that period of time, something was said to the Attorney General that proved that she lost her job because she stood up to him?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we take very seriously the matter before the Justice Committee and indeed the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. That is why, as a government, we determined to take the unprecedented step of waiving cabinet confidentiality, of waiving solicitor-client privilege that allows the former Attorney General to speak fully to the matter in question. This is something that Canadians expect. They want to be able to hear different perspectives on this matter, and that is exactly what they're going to get to hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, they were dragged kicking and screaming to the Justice Committee before they even started to allow people to give testimony. And they're still only allowing half the story to be told, and the half of the story that he's comfortable hearing. But there's more to this story. Something happened. Something was said to the former Attorney General, or someone in the Prime Minister's office validated her accusations that she lost her job because she wouldn't let his friends off the hook. Isn't that why he won't waive full privilege in this matter?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Unlike the Harper Conservatives, we take very seriously the institutions and the processes and the procedures that are fundamental to our system of justice, to the rule of law, and to our very institutions. That is why we take great care when we take an unprecedented step like waiving solicitor-client privilege in this matter, like waiving cabinet confidentiality in this matter. I think it's important that Canadians get a chance to hear from a broad range of perspectives, and that's exactly what they will be able to do.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, first of all, it's not unprecedented. Other Prime Ministers have waived full privilege when it related to investigations during their time in office. But, Mr. Speaker, for weeks, the Prime Minister was speaking for the Attorney General, and now he is deciding what's relevant. He's deciding what he's going to allow her to speak. So this is a very simple question. Why? Why won't he waive privilege for the time period between when she lost her job and when she resigned from Cabinet? What's he trying to hide?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition seems to be shifting in its approach because the Justice Committee and indeed the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner are very much focused on a very specific question that they are looking into. And we have waived privilege and we have waived cabinet confidentiality so that the former Attorney General can speak fully and expansively to the matter under study. That is what Canadians expect. That is exactly what we are doing because we understand how important it is is to make sure the Canadians hear a diverse range of perspectives.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski, Nejet, Témiscouata, Les Basques. Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General of Canada will be testifying before the Justice Committee this afternoon, but that doesn't mean that we'll still get the whole story. She'll not be able to talk about any actions or communications regarding or involving her after January 14th when she was shuffled to Veterans Affairs. Allowing her to give half of this story risks raising more questions than it provides answers. Why does he want to control what she's saying at any cost? Why not allow her to comment on her resignation from Cabinet? Is the Prime Minister's office so afraid of what she's going to see, the Right Honourable the Prime Minister? Mr. Speaker, we have confidence in the processes, including the Justice Committee and the Ethics Commissioner. And that's why we waived confidentiality, which was preventing the former Attorney General to speak freely before this committee. We want her to be able to share her perspective on the matter before the Justice Committee, and so that's what we allowed. The Honourable Member for Rimouski, Nejet, Témiscouata, Les Basques. Yes, but what about after January 14th? That's the problem. For example, we're probably not going to find out why she wrote after being shuffled that, and I quote, "It's a pillar of our democracy that our legal system be free of any appearances of political obstruction." We won't find out why she resigned. And above all, we won't find out the content of her presentation to Cabinet, which was an extraordinary appearance that could probably shed light on this issue. If the Prime Minister can give 5 versions of the story, why not take the gag off that's preventing the former Minister of Justice to give her version? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. You know, I can understand why the opposition would want to maximize the political impact of this issue. But the Committee of Justice and the Ethics Commissioner have a specific matter to consider, and we have waived solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidentiality to allow the former Attorney General to speak fully to issues that are relevant to the matter at hand. That's exactly what Canadians deserve, and that's what we delivered.
For Timmins, James Bay.
Speaker, the former Minister of Justice has let it be known that she is still being silenced by this Prime Minister regarding the conversations that occurred between her and the Prime Minister's office prior to her decision to step down as Veterans Affairs Minister. So the Bob Fife story broke on February 7th. On February 11th, the Prime Minister said that her continued presence in Cabinet was a sign that everything was hunky-dory, and she quit the next day. We know she was under intense pressure in that period. So the simple question is, who spoke to her from the PMO? What was said? And why is the Prime Minister refusing to let her tell her whole story?
That's right.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the issue that is before the Justice Committee and before the Ethics Commissioner is one that Canadians want to see answers to and want to hear diverse perspectives from. That is why we waived cabinet confidentiality and solicitor-client privilege to enable the former Attorney General to speak fully to the matter under study. That is what Canadians expect, and that is exactly what we have delivered. The principle of confidentiality at Cabinet and solicitor-client is an important one.
Member for Timmins, James Bay.
Well, diverse perspectives, yeah, there's truth and non-truth. You know, I remember in Sunday school, they said that what is whispered in the back rooms is going to get shouted from the rooftops. So this is the Prime Minister's opportunity to come clean. Stop hiding behind those legal weasel mechanisms that's preventing the former minister from telling the whole truth. Will he waive the cabinet confidence on what was said to the member of Vancouver Granville in the lead up to her resignation? Better yet, will the Prime Minister agree to testify about his interference in this case and come clean on this whole tawdry affair? Will he
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, when the member opposite qualifies fundamental tenets of our justice system, of our cabinet government as weasel words, you see the partisan political approach that he is desperate to take. On this side of the House, we respect our institutions. We respect the full integrity of our justice system, and that is why we take very very carefully and very seriously the responsibility to defend those institutions, and always will. That is why we took the important step of waiving in this matter the confidentiality.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is preventing the former Attorney General from speaking. She specifically said he's preventing her from speaking about her time when she was Veterans Affairs Minister, about the conversations that they had just before she resigned, specifically in Vancouver, and from what she told Cabinet last week. So, Mr. Speaker, why is it that the Prime Minister only wants his version of their interactions to be disclosed? What is he hiding?
Honourable Prime Minister.
The matter in question before the Justice Committee, before the Ethics Commissioner, is focused on her time as Attorney General. And that is why when we went forward to waive confidentiality in regards to solicitor-client privilege, in regards to Cabinet confidence, we took very seriously this unprecedented step, because we know that Canadians need to hear all perspectives on this, and that is why we are moving forward in a responsible way that respects our institution.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
If we need to hear all perspectives, then we need to hear her full perspective. So will the Prime Minister do this very simple thing? Will he write a letter right now, he has just over an hour, and tell the former Attorney General that she can speak about the time when she was Veterans Affairs, she can talk about their conversations in Vancouver before she resigned, and she can talk about what she told Cabinet last week? Very simple. Will he do that right now?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
The members opposite don't seem to want to talk anymore about the fact that every step of the way we stood up for good jobs across this country. We stood up for Canadian workers. We stood up for the growth of our economy that we have been delivering over the past 3 years, while at the same time defending our institutions, defending the independence of our judiciary, and standing up for the rule of law. That is what Canadians expect of this government, of any government, and that is exactly what we are delivering on in every different instance.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, yesterday in her letter to the chair of the Standing Justice Committee, the former Attorney General said that she will not be able to speak about all the communications related to this interference scandal. So, if I've understood correctly, anyone who's come before the committee can speak freely about anything they knew except the former Attorney General. She will therefore be the only one without sufficient freedom to speak. Can the Prime Minister tell us why is he trying to muzzle her rather than allow her to speak freely before all Canadians? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the matter under consideration at the Justice Committee and with the Ethics Commissioner is very specific, and we have given the former Attorney General the freedom to speak fully to that matter under consideration. This is very important, and it's something that isn't taken lightly. It's not something that we take lightly when we waive solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidentiality. But on this matter, for this important study, we felt it was the right thing to do. The Honourable Member for Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, we're not inventing anything here in the opposition. She's the one, the former Attorney General, a Liberal, sitting on that side of the House, who said clearly that she does not have the freedom to speak to everything before the Justice Committee. She won't be able to talk about when she was the Minister of Veterans Affairs. She won't be able to talk about what was said during meetings in Vancouver just before her resignation. She won't be able to talk about what happened in Cabinet or at Liberal caucus last week after her resignation. She will not be able to speak all her truth. Why? Why does the Prime Minister not want? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have given the ability to the former Attorney General to speak freely with respect to the matter under consideration by the committee. Now, I can understand why members opposite want to make political hay with this, but we are interested in a rigorous process, and we will always stand up for that. That's what we've always done, Mr. Speaker. We respect our institutions, and we stand up to protect workers and businesses all over the country who deserve to be defended and not to be attacked like this opposition is doing.
Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the former Attorney General wrote to the chair of the Justice Committee to indicate that the Prime Minister's order in council, quote, falls short of what is required, unquote, in terms of sharing all relevant information. The Prime Minister has just a little over an hour. If he truly has nothing to hide, then why won't he simply lift all solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidentiality? What is he afraid of?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, defending our institutions, defending the rule of law, defending the independence and rigor of our justice system is something that we take very, very seriously. So the decision to waive solicitor-client privilege and indeed cabinet confidentiality is not one to be taken lightly, but it is one that we took in this case because it is important that the Justice Committee, that the Conflict of Interest Commissioner and Ethics Commissioner are able to do their work, and that is why we took that unprecedented step.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
The Prime Minister's order in council prevents the former Attorney General from discussing her resignation from Cabinet, the presentation that she gave to Cabinet following her resignation, and discussions that she had upon being fired as the Attorney General. All matters relevant to getting to the heart of the truth. Why is the Prime Minister trying to silence his former Attorney General? What is he afraid of?
Right Honourable Prime Minister. Order.
The member opposite obviously misunderstands what the order in council is all about. It is actually about waiving solicitor-client privilege, waiving cabinet confidentiality so that the former Attorney General can speak to this.
Order. Order. Members know that each side gets its turn, and there'll be more turns for each side. And so I invite members to show that they can be patient and act like adults and not be interrupting. The Right Honourable Prime Minister has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, the principles of solicitor-client privilege, the principle of cabinet confidentiality are fundamental tenets of our justice system and indeed of our system of government, and we do not and will never take those principles lightly.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Mr. Speaker, since the very beginning of the SNC-Lavalin affair, the Prime Minister has refused to tell the truth. For almost 3 weeks, the Prime Minister's message has changed on a daily basis, and he has refused to give permission to the former Attorney General to speak while allowing the current Attorney General to speak to the media on a daily basis. That's ridiculous. Today, after question period, the Prime Minister is finally allowing the member for Vancouver-Grenville to tell us what happened, but only in part. The Prime Minister promised to be different, Mr. Speaker. So why is he not allowing her to speak her full truth? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since the very beginning, I have always been very clear on what we're doing. We have always and will always stand up to defend jobs, to defend workers, to defend businesses throughout the country while respecting and protecting our institutions, the rule of law, and the principles of our democracy. That's what we will continue to do, including waiving solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidence to allow the former Attorney General to speak to this matter.
For Victoria.
From the beginning of the SNC-Lavalin affair, the Prime Minister sent mixed messages to Canadians. First, he refused to allow the former Attorney General to speak at all. Then he gave in, but only a little bit. This week, she wrote the Justice Committee and said she won't be able to tell us anything as to what happened after January the 14th. Are these the actions of a Prime Minister who says sunlight is the best disinfectant? Enough is enough. Will the Prime Minister speak, let her tell her story, speak her truth, and tell Canadians exactly what happened?
Right Honourable Prime Minister. Order.
Mr. Speaker, I know the member opposite has deep respect for our justice system and for the fundamentals of that justice system and knows full well that solicitor-client privilege is one of the foundational tenets of our justice system, as well as the cabinet confidentiality being one of the fundamental necessary tenets of the functioning of our democratic system. That is why when we take the step to waive cabinet confidentiality and solicitor-client privilege in this matter, that is something that he must recognize is a significant step towards.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister isn't answering the question. Will the Prime Minister right now give permission to the former Attorney General to speak freely about her time as Veterans Affairs Minister, about the meetings she had with the Prime Minister in Vancouver, and her presentation to Cabinet last week? And if not, why not?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we respect the responsibility of the Justice Committee and the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner to get to the bottom of this matter and to have a full airing of this, and that is why we have taken the unprecedented step of waiving cabinet confidentiality and solicitor-client privilege in regards to the matter that is under study by that committee. Now, the members opposite don't seem to be pleased with that because they are playing political games with that. What we are doing is allowing for a full airing of this matter at committee.
Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister respects the committee, let them do their job. Let them hear from the former Attorney General. We're asking the Prime Minister, and Canadians deserve the truth. They deserve an answer from this Prime Minister right now. Will the Prime Minister waive the privilege? Will he waive the cabinet confidentiality and let the former Attorney General speak freely about her time as Veterans Affairs Minister, speak freely about their meeting in Vancouver? Will the Prime Minister waive the privilege?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, that the members opposite have moved entirely off the actual matter in question, which is regarding what happened while she was Attorney General and Minister of Justice. This is something that we know Canadians want to hear from, and why we have taken the unprecedented step of waiving cabinet confidentiality and solicitor-client privilege to enable the former Attorney General to speak to the matter at studying at committee.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, who has already expressed his admiration for dictators, seems to want to govern Canada in the same way. In the SNC-Lavalin matter, the former Attorney General wanted to enforce the law, but that was contrary to the Prime Minister's wishes. He, his Chief of Staff, his Principal Secretary, and even the Clerk of the Privy Council pressured her to stop the trial, a trial that began on October 29. What lawful authority did the Prime Minister have to allow his collaborators to speak to the staff of the former Attorney General on December 18th? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, what this government has done at every stage is to stand up, to defend workers, to defend jobs in Quebec and throughout the country, and to defend the interests of all Canadians and businesses and the work they do throughout the country. We will always stand up for Canadians and for their jobs while respecting the independence of our judiciary, while respecting our institutions, and while respecting the rule of law. That's what we have always done, and that's what we will always do, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member, Mr. Speaker, you shouldn't break the law to protect jobs. On December 19th, the Prime Minister and his cabinet dined with the Clerk of the Privy Council. Later in the day, the clerk called the former Attorney General to ask her to stop the trial. The Prime Minister, his Chief of Staff, his Principal Secretary, and even the Clerk of the Privy Council are all in on it. Canadians want to know what lawful authority the Prime Minister had to give instructions to the clerk to put pressure on her. The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's very troubling to see that the Conservatives have chosen to play petty politics and attack workers of Lavalin, attack workers throughout the country. We on this side of the House and all Quebecers and Canadians know this. We will always defend jobs. We will always stand up for workers, and we will do it while respecting the rule of law and while respecting our institutions, including the independence of our judiciary. The Conservatives' attacks aren't going to do anything to change that.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont, La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, during an event at school called The Planet Goes to School, hundreds of young people have called on the government for help, and all politicians for help, because they'll have to deal with the price of climate change. Will the Liberals listen, and will they present a budget where they will put an end to the subsidies for fossil fuels? We should put an end to hesitation and half measures. When will the Liberals finally understand and act accordingly? The Prime Minister. As Prime Minister and Minister for Youth, I have spent a lot of time talking to young people across the country. Despite what the NDP says, we don't have to make a choice between growing the economy and protecting the environment. We do both at the same time. And that's exactly what we're doing, putting a price on pollution and investing in ways to transport our resources in a safer way. This is what young people expect, and this is what we're doing and will continue to do.
The by-election in Burnaby South, people made it clear to Jagmeet Singh that the Liberals only care about the wealthy and well-connected. Everyday Canadians are struggling to put food on the table. They can't afford the medication that they need. While the Liberals will move heaven and earth to help the corporate elites, everyday Canadians are left behind. All Canadians deserve safe, affordable housing, public universal pharmacare, and food on the table. No more delays, no more excuses. Will the Prime Minister put everyday Canadians first for a change and make real investments for people who need it most in Budget 2019?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP never lets the facts get in the way of a good rhetorical question, because on this side of the House, we set a goal of achieving the lowest poverty level in Canada's history. And yesterday, the Canadian Income Survey showed that we hit our first target 3 years ahead of schedule. In the first 2 years of our mandate, our investments helped lift 820,000 people out of poverty, including almost 300,000 children. That is what we are doing to help people in Canada.
The Honourable Member for Madawaska-Restigouche. Mr. Speaker, members of the Standing Committee on Official Languages and I myself are proud of the Official Languages Act, which celebrates its 50th anniversary today. It has allowed for enormous progress on the language and identity front. Official languages, our official languages, are a source of pride. They're an integral part of who we are. Will the Prime Minister share what the government will be doing to celebrate this act? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Madawaska-Restigouche for his extraordinary work. We will be celebrating the French fact in Canada with the support of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. We will always support official language minority groups. We will have the Minister responsible for La Francophonie and the Official Languages Act to make sure that everything is modernized, to make sure we always support our official language minority communities Canada-wide. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General cannot speak all her truth to the Justice Committee because the Prime Minister won't allow her to. On the other hand, the Prime Minister can answer a very simple question to reassure Canadians. Was there someone in the Prime Minister's office or in some minister's office who assured SNC that they would avoid criminal proceedings? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, at every stage, we have been doing what Canadians expect of us. Defending jobs, defending workers, investing in economic growth. all the while protecting our institutions, respecting the rule of law, the independence of our judicial system. We have always done this. We will always do this, Mr. Speaker, defend jobs and defend our institutions, always. The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, the best way to defend these institutions is to let people have the facts. Now, this Prime Minister has not allowed the former Attorney General to speak all her truth. Was there someone in the Prime Minister's office or in some minister's office who was helping spare SNC-Lavalin a criminal trial? Yes or no? The Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have and we will always defend good jobs Canada-wide. We will defend workers who work so hard every day to create a better Canada and to help their families. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we will always make sure we obey the law, we protect the integrity of our judiciary, that we defend our institutions. This is what Canadians expect. And we saw that after 10 years of Conservative rule, neither of these things was done.
Aware that the former Attorney General has written a letter to the Justice Committee explaining that the Order in Council that the Prime Minister keeps bragging about falls far short of what is required. She goes on to say it does nothing to release me from any restrictions that apply to communications while I served as Minister of Veterans Affairs, and it leaves in place whatever restraints that are on my ability to speak freely about matters that occurred after I left my post as Attorney General. Why has the Prime Minister kept the restraints on the former Attorney General unless he's afraid of what she's going to say?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
That is before the Justice Committee and the Conflict of Interest Commissioner is entirely focused on her time as Attorney General. Now, we know that the system of cabinet confidentiality and solicitor-client privilege is a fundamental tenet, extraordinarily important both to our democracy and to our system of justice, and that is why we took the unprecedented step of waiving those elements so that Canadians could hear directly from the former Attorney General on this matter.
Honourable Member for Chilliwack Hope.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister had no trouble talking about that period of time after he fired her as Attorney General and until she resigned. The Clerk of the Privy Council had no trouble talking about that period of time after the former Attorney General was moved along and then resigned. So why is the Prime Minister preventing the person who was fired and who resigned from sharing her full truth? Why is he placing the restraints on her? Why won't he do the right thing and lift them right now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
For 10 years, Canadians watched Stephen Harper and his Conservatives disrespect our institutions, play games with the rule of law, and meddle with the independence of the judiciary. They expect government to stand up and defend our institutions, including one of the fundamental tenets of our justice system, which is solicitor-client privilege, and indeed a fundamental tenet of our government, which is cabinet confidentiality. When we make the decision to waive those elements so the former Attorney General can speak to this matter, that is a big deal, Mr.
Order. There's far too much noise, and I've asked the member for Chilliwack Hope and others to not interrupt when someone else has the floor. The honourable member for Desnethé Mississippi Churchill River.
Mr. Speaker, Northerners are taking part in the Ice Road Jig Challenge to raise awareness about Ice Road communities. Their message is clear. We need roads that work all year to bring supplies to our communities and to travel to doctor appointments. The Liberals don't seem to understand that climate change is making Hatchet Lake First Nation inaccessible because the ice roads are open for shorter periods of time. Why does this Liberal government keep neglecting the basic needs of Northerners?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have made made historic investments in infrastructure, including in partnership with Indigenous communities right across the country. I personally had the pleasure and honor to spend some time with the community in Hatchet Lake one winter a few years ago and got to see directly the challenges they're facing. That is why this government is committed to reconciliation, to investment, to partnership with Indigenous communities right across this country to make sure we're building a better future together for everyone in this country.
For Churchill, Tuatnook-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, First Nations leaders from Manitoba came to Ottawa this week to once again call on the government to respect their rights and move on treaty land entitlement. For 2 months, they asked to meet with the new minister, but he couldn't be bothered. When he was appointed, he said he had a lot to learn, and yet he couldn't bother to walk 2 blocks to meet with leaders that want to help him understand his historic obligation. Learning? This is failing the test. So will the Prime Minister direct his minister to do his homework, and will their government stop disrespecting First Nations rights to land?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm extraordinarily proud of the work that the Minister of Indigenous Services is doing every single day to build a better future for Indigenous peoples. In regards to Northern Manitoba, it was this government that moved forward to restore rail service to Churchill. We did that in a way that partnered with Indigenous communities along the way, that gave them ownership over that railroad, that makes sure that they are integral and empowered in the future of Northern Manitoba and indeed of Northern Canada.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
The Prime Minister claims that if he had allowed SNC to face criminal conviction, the company would be banned from getting federal contracts and would go out of business. But wait, in December 2015, the government gave SNC a deal exempting it from the ban despite criminal charges. Now the government is changing the policy to exempt SNC even if it gets convicted. So if he plans to allow SNC to get contracts even after a conviction, why did he need to intervene to stop the company from going to trial in the first place?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
On this side of the House, we will always defend Canadian jobs. We will always defend workers. We will always defend pensioners. We will always stand up for the economic growth that unfortunately simply did not happen under 10 years of Conservative government. But at the same time, what also didn't happen under 10 years of the Conservative government is respect for our institutions, respect for the independence of law, and the kind of thoughtful processes that actually defend our justice system. That is exactly what we're doing at the same time. We are protecting jobs while standing up for the rule of law in this country.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
The Prime Minister says that he needed to protect SNC-Lavalin from conviction because then they wouldn't be able to bid on federal work and the business would go under. But yesterday, his public service minister confirmed that a simple policy change would have allowed the company, even after conviction, to bid on those federal contracts and continue to operate. So given that revelation, and given that he wasn't doing this to protect workers, who was he trying to protect?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Step of the way, we did what Canadians expect us to, which is both stand up for jobs, defend Canadian workers, defend the economic growth that didn't happen under 10 years of Stephen Harper, while at the same time protecting our institutions, standing up for the rule of law, and defending the integrity and the independence of our judicial system. That is what this government has always done. That, Mr. Speaker, is what we will always do.
A member for Carleton.
He still fails to answer the question. He claimed for so long that he needed to allow SNC-Lavalin to avoid conviction so it could continue to have federal contracts. We now know from his own minister's admission that a simple policy change would allow SNC to go on getting contracts and employing people, so that can't be his real motivation. Obviously, he was protecting someone else. So if this is not about protecting jobs, who was he protecting?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
For
For 10 years, the member opposite was part of a government that did not do a good job of protecting jobs, of creating growth for Canadians. Indeed, had the lowest growth rate of any prime minister since R.B. Bennett in the depths of the Great Depression. At the same time, we saw countless examples for 10 years of them torquing the truth in favor of partisan interests, of disrespecting the judiciary, including Supreme Court judges. We will consistently stand up to create jobs, to protect jobs, and to protect our institutions at the exact same time, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Steveston, Richmond East.
Mr. Speaker, last summer the government announced Opportunity for All, Canada's first ever national poverty reduction strategy. The strategy highlights all the investments the government has made in the fight against poverty. It also sets ambitious targets of reducing poverty by 20% by 2020 and by 50% by 2030. Could the Prime Minister tell the House what progress is being made towards meeting these targets?
For Steveston Richmond, for his question and his hard work. We set a goal of achieving the lowest poverty level in Canada's history. Yesterday, the Canadian Income Survey showed that we hit our first target 3 years ahead of schedule. In the first 2 years of our mandate, our investments helped lift over 820,000 people out of poverty, which includes 278,000 children. Thanks to programs like the Canada Child Benefit, which of course was opposed by the Conservatives, we are giving every Canadian a real and fair chance at success.
The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the former Ontario Liberal Attorney General Michael Bryan stated that a crime may have been committed when the Prime Minister conspired to stop the criminal trial of a company charged with bribery. Legal experts, including a former judge, agree that a crime may have been committed and that the RCMP should investigate. A simple question with a simple answer. Has the Prime Minister, any former or current cabinet minister, or anyone in his office been contacted by the RCMP?
Honourable Prime Minister.
No, not to our knowledge.
The honourable member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Mr. Speaker, a couple of weeks ago, I stood in this House to raise the alarm on the increase in rejections of the disability tax credit applications. And it's a disturbing fact that there's a 60% increase in rejections. And to make matters worse, Liberals have clawed back over $26 million from people with severe and prolonged impairments. They still haven't fixed this problem. Liberals are clearly out of touch. But what Canadians really want to know now is this. How could the Liberals let this happen?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is the government that moved forward on the historic Accessible Canada Act for the first time, moving forward with a comprehensive approach to removing barriers for all Canadians. We recognize that a country like Canada needs to make sure that every single Canadian has a full opportunity to participate and has the support and benefits that they need in order to succeed and contribute to our country. That is exactly what we've done with this historic legislation. There's still much more work to do, and we will do it, but we will do it together.
The honourable member for Mississauga Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, we know that Canadians need access to telecommunications services to participate fully and to succeed in a digital economy. But Canadians have expressed concerns about the quality, coverage, and most significantly, the cost of these essential services and are looking for lower cost options and innovative services. Can the Prime Minister please update the House on our government's work to ensure that Canadians have access to quality services at more affordable prices?
Great question. Minister.
I thank the member from Mississauga Lake for his hard work and for his thoughtful thoughtful questions. We are constantly listening to the concerns of Canadians. We are taking action to increase competition because that is the best way to bring down the cost of services like internet and cell phone plans. Yesterday, we proposed clear direction to the CRTC to build on our work to date. Telecommunications policy decisions must put consumers first. We need to ensure that Canadians can get the access they need at prices they can afford, and that is exactly what we are doing.
Honourable Member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
The Prime Minister conspired to stop the criminal trial of a company charged with bribery, and this is what the bribery looked like.
Order. I invite members to be judicious in the use of words. There are certain accusations we cannot make here except in certain ways. So I'd ask the member to be careful in the use of her words. Order. Members ought to be able to be familiar with the rules, and I'm prepared to talk to them privately if they wish. The honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
This is what SNC's intervention looked like. $30,000 worth of Canadian prostitutes given to Muammar Gaddafi's son. This is the so-called victimless crime that our woke, feminist Prime Minister is moving mountains to cover up. When did the Prime Minister learn that SNC-Lavalin paid for prostitutes for Muammar Gaddafi's son?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, we will stand up for Canadian workers. We will stand up for good jobs right across this country. We will do so in a way that is consistent with our values, with our expectations, and with the rule of law. That is the matter that we will stay focused on in this. We will defend Canadian jobs, and we will ensure that we're being consistent both with our values and with the rules and laws in place.
Député.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has known for over a year that SNC is under threat of losing all government contracts if there is no remediation agreement. His lack of action has led to the loss of $1.6 billion for the company. This includes Quebecers' savings. Further, his lack of action may cost thousands of jobs in Quebec as well as a major head office. Why has the Prime Minister abandoned the workers of SNC-Lavalin? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Quebecers know that this government takes its responsibilities very seriously. Its responsibilities to defend jobs and economic growth. We will always do this while respecting the law, our institutions, and the independence of our judiciary. This is what Canadians expect of us. The Honourable Member for Drummond on a point of order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask for unanimous consent because once again, the National Energy Board did not fulfill its duties regarding the Official Languages Act. This is serious, and I'm sure you will find there is unanimous consent for the following motion: that the House condemn the actions of the NEB, which in its report on the Trans Mountain expansion presented its report in English only, and that it asks the Minister of Official Languages to use her regulatory powers to make sure that all federal reports be tabled in both official languages. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the Honourable Member the unanimous consent to table the motion? No, he does not.
Opposition Leader is rising on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, there seemed to have been some confusion on the Liberal side during question period. I'd like to seek unanimous consent. They seem to think that the allegations that were made today come from the Conservative side, but it's in fact from the former Attorney General herself. So I'd like to table the letter that the former Attorney General wrote to the Justice Committee that indicates that the Prime Minister's actions fall, quote, short of what is required when it comes to waiving privilege in this case.
Does the Honourable Leader of the Opposition have the unanimous consent of the House to table? No, there is no unanimous consent. Come in a...
It being 3:12, Pursuant to order made on Tuesday, February 26, 2019, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on motion M194 under